Hello and welcome to the Glowface Digital Wellbeing Podcast. I am, of course, your host, David Talbot, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. Happy New Year. I hope you had a good break over the holidays and got to enjoy some quality time with your friends and family. Maybe even got to travel somewhere and you decided to brave the holiday travel season, which, kudos to you. I could never do it with two kids. But I hope you come back feeling refreshed, ready to take on 2024. This is the first podcast I'm recording in the new year. So really keen to get into today's podcast and talk about some more digital wellbeing concepts. As always, podcasts, we sort of talk more theoretical, more philosophical sort of ideas around the digital wellbeing space. What are some of the sort of things driving it from a philosophical and ideological standpoint around our phone uses, our addictions, and I guess really kind of bringing to light some of the obscurities as well that happen when we use our phones all the time. And today I kind of want to talk about screens and socializing. And I sort of say socializing as a broad range of, bringing up, using our phones. I guess it's the main way you can use screens in a social setting is really using our phones in a social setting. Now that could be a social setting, such as a gathering of friends. It could be within a family group, and you could think about a family of 4 or 5 just having dinner out or dinner at home. It could be in a professional environment. It could be in a work meeting. It could be anywhere really where you are in a group of people and someone decides to inevitably bring out their phone and start to undergo an activity. It could be a range of things that they feel compelled to do at that time. And I'm sure, look, sometimes it's valid. I'm sure they have something urgent to attend to. There is something that needs their attention. They need to reply to a text. Maybe your loved one's unwell. Maybe there is something pressing at work that they need to excuse themselves from the conversation or from the social setting to engage with their device for some reason. And hopefully when people do that, they're clear about that, either leading into the engagement. They let everyone know that, hey, I might have to step out. I might have to take a phone call. I might have to reply to an email or a text. Excuse me if I do, but I want to make sure that I attend to this issue. I've got this thing going on right now. So hopefully people are sort of forthcoming with why they need to use screens in a social setting. But I guess if for those situations when people aren't and people casually interact with their device in a social setting, let's just sort of break down what that really is. And I guess first thing first is, when did that become socially acceptable? Like, it is weirdly socially acceptable behavior to interact with your screen, your device, during a social setting. It seems to be really okay to, take your phone out of your pocket and reply to text. It's okay to check your emails at dinner. It's okay to, now it's not best practice, but it's socially acceptable. I kind of want to get that out right there. It's not good. I'm not saying it's good, but we just seem to have become okay with it as society. And when you look at it, sort of, you take a step back from what it is as a practice, as an idea, it is quite unusual, right? We are doing work or an activity and we stop. We should bring that activity, to the social activity, stop the social activity because of that work or that activity. And I guess you could think about it when you could replace the use of a phone really obscurely with other practices, right? And you could think about this from a historical standpoint. Well, how did people used to communicate all the time going back, 100, 200 years ago? Well, they'd have to send letters, before the invention of the telephone. And even when the telephone was invented, when you were out at lunch or dinner or wherever it was, you only really had mobile phones in the last 30 years or so, where you could be, really 20 years realistically, where you could be accessed in a non-home environment. So even in, for most of human history, the communication method with people was less like letter writing, right? You do long distance letters, you'd have pen pals and this sort of thing, and that would be quite standard. So imagine just today if someone sat down in a social setting, in, let's say, a work meeting, right? You're in a meeting at work, talking about something, they disengage from the meeting, and they pull out a pen and paper and start writing a letter. Now, absolutely, someone in that meeting would stop and say, Jimmy, what are you doing? You're writing a letter, and Jimmy would say, yeah, I'm writing a letter. I'm writing a letter to my cousin Fred. He's in the US. We're pen pals. Now that would be such an obscure thing to do, right? We would think about it so weird. But if Jimmy did the same thing, pulled his phone out and started texting his cousin friend in the US about something that some part of ongoing communication, jumped on a WhatsApp group for a few minutes, then no one will bat an eye. Unless it's an important meeting where everyone should be attending to and it seems to be, incredibly professional, then, but generally speaking, right? Generally speaking, no one would bat an eye if you picked up your phone and replied to a message for a minute or two during a meeting. But it is completely analogous to writing a letter. It's completely analogous to an obscure activity, but yet we're so socially accepting of it. You could even go even further and be even more outrageous and think about, well, what if you were at lunch with a friend and, you're sitting down with a friend and all of a sudden they pull out, let's say, a Rubik's Cube, and they start solving the Rubik's Cube. Like, you would just stop and think, like, what the fuck? Like, what am I doing with this person solving a Rubik's Cube? And you know, well, hey, Tanya, why have you pulled out a Rubik's Cube? Why are you trying to solve it? And Tanya would say, oh, well, I just got a bit bored. And it's, again, analogous to sitting down with a friend, having a coffee, and then pulling it out their phone, having a scroll through Instagram, so checking out a reel on, or a video on TikTok. Like, that's what we're dealing with here. And it's unusual that it's become so socially acceptable to engage with our devices in social settings. And I guess, why is that? And like, I really don't have a clear answer. I think it's because, likely our phones are a signaling tool of some somewhat importance, and I guess that kind of leads into the second conversation piece is, what does it say about you as an individual? If you're the person who's picked your phone up during the meeting or picked your phone up during a social interaction, what does it say about you? But what does it also say about the people you're with and the place that you're in? I guess, what does it say about you? Well, I think it is some sort of signaling that you're important. You're almost too important for this conversation, for this setting. In fact, I'm so important right now that what we're doing in the present moment is not of value to me. In fact, the most important thing to me right now is whatever is on this device. And it's quite something, and I know we don't say that overtly, but it definitely gives off this signal that, hey, well, my friends pulled out their phone, I'm sure they've got something important to attend to. And most of the time, let's be honest, there's nothing really so pressing on our phones all the time that we need to, attend to it in all these different settings and that we could have as in a social way. So it does feel like it's bestowing some level of seniority or importance to that individual during the conversation. So I just want to, I just noticed the creepy clown violin in the back of the picture. It's a present from a long time ago, so I'll move that one for the next podcast if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you're listening on somewhere else, then yes, there is a creepy clown in the video, and there's also a Duff beer bottle, which I might move as well. But what it is, what does pulling your phone out at lunch say about you? Well, I think it says about you that you trying to. It's a way to say that I'm important. I'm so important. I have something to do right now that I need to take myself out of the present moment. And what are you signaling also to the person you're with? Well, I think you're saying a few things to the person you're with. One, you're saying they're not important. You're saying that you're not interesting enough to be giving my attention to right now. You haven't stimulated my need for dopamine and novelty enough, and you need, I need to go somewhere else to find it. And effectively, whatever we're doing right now is not interesting enough for me. What is much more interesting than the present moment is my phone, is my socials, is the person I'm texting or the WhatsApp group I'm texting. Is more important. So it begs the question, why would you bother even going out to have coffee or lunch or go to a social setting? Why would you go to a party and interact with the device in such a way? wouldn't you just be better off staying home? I think that says the same thing about, locations, right? Like, what does it say about the location that you're in? If you're at a party and you go on your phone, you scroll socials, you go to somewhere else you'd rather be. Phones take you to a reality. Social media takes you to a reality that does not exist. It's pretend, but it takes you somewhere else. It takes you out of the present moment. It lifts your awareness. It lifts your mental state. It starts to produce dopamine. It takes you to imaginary places that people exist in, right? Imaginary places where everyone's happy and beautiful and pretty and, lifting huge weights and making great dishes and, just progressing so amazingly in life. Takes you to these foreign locations where that's everyone's world, when in fact that is the 1% of the 1% in our world, right? That's we know the reality that social media presents to us is false, but that's what it does. It takes you out of the present location and takes you somewhere else. And ultimately, that's what going on your device is saying about you when you do that in a social setting. Say, oh, like this lunch or this dinner or this meeting is not important to me. Or this is not holding my attention enough. This is not somewhere I want to be, either because perhaps it's uncomfortable, because maybe we've engaged in a social interaction and admittedly we weren't ready for this. We don't have that depth of a relationship to have a coffee. We don't have the depth of relationship to have a dinner. And so we're on our phones instead of interacting with each other. And so, we avoid the uncomfortable by going on our device. We take ourselves to somewhere else that doesn't make us face the present moment of uncomfort or lack of conversation or whatever the issue is presenting itself in the conversation. Maybe it's a tense topic's arisen, you want to take an escape from that, so you jump on your phone, group chat, right? Whatever it is, you're saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be wherever my device takes me. So ultimately, I think that's what it's really interesting, one, that the use of phones in social settings has become so acceptable, and two, that, firstly, it says about you as a person. You're saying that I'm more important than you, I'm more important than this meeting. What I have to do on my device is more important than where I am right now. So I think it's a power play. I honestly think it's a social power play when you jump on your device to say, hey, this is, you are not as important as you need to be. This place isn't as important as it could be to me. Wherever my phone can take me is so much better. And so you tell the other person that they're not interesting. You tell them that they're not important enough. And you also tell the people you're with, the group, or you're also saying to yourself mentally that the place, location I'm in isn't where I want to be. So let me go somewhere else. So really, that's my thoughts around why, what does it mean to go on your phone, in a social setting. I think, we would be in a much better situation, admittedly, in social situations if people just didn't go on their phones. And if you have to go on your phone in a social setting, you're more upfront about it. You're, apologetic, because it is ultimately rude, because those things I've described are pretty rude, pretty inconsiderate things to do to other people, to tell them in a not so direct way that they're not important, to tell the group you're with you don't want to be there, you want to be somewhere else. And so if you're upfront about the fact that you might need to do that, then that's more considerate and caring of other people. I also think, if we put our devices away, it also forces better connection. It forces better conversation. And it forces us to deal with the fact that maybe this relationship isn't as deep as it could be. How do we make it deeper? Maybe we don't need to be sitting down doing having a coffee or a dinner. Let's go and do something. Let's go and do something productive. Let's go to the gym together. Let's go rock climbing, bowling, whatever it is, go and do something instead of forcing some social interaction that instead of just chatting, you end up on your phone, right? So I guess it does give you the chance to be reflective of the relationship itself. Is it as fact as strong as you might think it is? And, if someone pulled out a Rubik's Cube whilst you're having a conversation with them, or started writing a letter, then whilst you're having a dinner, you'd think it's pretty weird. And so I think it would do us a little bit of do us it would be a benefit to society, I think, if we reframed what it meant to pull your phone out at dinner, rather than making it something as casual and socially acceptable as it is. we start to look at it in a little bit of a weird way, because it really is weird that we feel compelled to do this, and we should more confront it, I think, more in social situations, and we really should look to learn to not to engage with that device, and learn to be more present. Ultimately, by not going on your phone during a social interaction, then you're more present. And by being more present, that's where life is best lived. So I'll leave it there for today. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Of course, we'll be back again next week. I am going to definitely keep testing the idea that the way to get traction in this digital world is to just be consistent. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep being consistent. So appreciate the time you taking to check out this week's podcast, and hopefully you'll hear from me again next week, no doubt. Speak soon.